always believed the end would come with a bang. Some dramatic climax, maybe catching him in bed with her, or walking in on a whispered conversation that stopped the moment I entered. But no, it started with something much quieter. Something off. It was the cologne, actually. A subtle change, barely noticeable. He never used to wear anything scented, said he preferred clean smells, soap and detergent, and nothing more. But then one night, as he leaned in to kiss me goodbye before heading out with the boys, I caught something different. Muskier, sharper, and completely not him. I asked about it, casually. He shrugged, said one of his mates left it at the gym and he just tried it on for a laugh. I laughed too, but it stuck with me. That wasn't a laugh smell. That was a first date smell. And suddenly, I couldn't remember the last time he looked me in the eye for longer than a second. From there, it spiraled. Missed calls, messages read, never replied to, plans canceled last minute with excuses that felt slightly too rehearsed. The way he seemed distracted even when we were together, tapping his foot, glancing at his phone when he thought I wasn't looking. I told myself I was overthinking, that I was tired, that it was work stress, that we all go through patches, like this. But something about it felt familiar, like a déjà vu of something I hadn't even lived yet. It's funny, the way your body knows before your brain does. That twitch in your stomach, the quickened heartbeat when you hear your name, said the wrong way. I started noticing more, the way he'd change the subject whenever I brought up future plans, the new passwords on his phone, the receipts I never saw until they were already spent. There was one night, one that really locked it in for me, when he came home late, drunk, and smiling like he had a secret. He curled into bed, wrapped his arm around me like he used to when we first met. And I remember lying there, stiff as a board, wide awake while he snored next to me, thinking, I'm sleeping beside someone who's already left me. He just hasn't moved out yet. But even then, I didn't confront him. Not directly. I wasn't ready. My pride was bruised but intact. My heart hadn't fully shattered. There was still a part of me, small, stupid, hopeful, that wanted to be wrong, that wanted to believe this wasn't what it felt like, that I wasn't being replaced. Still, the seed had been planted. Something was off. And no matter how many smiles I forced, or dinners I cooked, or questions I swallowed, that truth sat in the back of my throat like a lump I couldn't cough out. The end had already started. It just hadn't introduced itself yet. After that night, I started collecting clues, not because I wanted to prove myself right, but because I needed to stop feeling crazy. You know that hollow, creeping doubt, the kind that makes you second-guess your own memory? That was me, tiptoeing around my own life like a guest in someone else's home. So I did what any woman quietly breaking inside would do. I became a detective, not the obvious kind. I didn't snoop through his phone or hire someone. I just paid attention. The first real breadcrumb was on his Spotify. He left it open on the TV one night while getting ready in the bathroom. He was humming along to a playlist I didn't recognize. Slow R&B, love songs, stuff he'd normally make fun of. I clicked into it. The name? For Us. Us? My arse. I never got serenaded. I got takeaway dinners and the same 2 movies on loop. He walked in while I was staring at the screen, and I swear he froze for a second. Just 1 second? That was all I needed. Then came the Uber receipts. He always took care of the finances, said he liked to be organized. But one morning, when he accidentally forwarded a booking confirmation to my email, I noticed it. A ride to a hotel across town, at midnight, 2 weeks ago. I remembered that night. He told me he stayed late at the office because of client deadlines. Right. I didn't confront him. Not yet. Instead, I smiled, made his coffee like always, kissed his cheek, and told him to have a good day. But I also opened a new email folder, started storing screenshots, playlists, calendar entries, little details. Things only I would notice because I knew him better than he thought I did. The day I found the hair tie in his car, light blonde, not mine, I nearly laughed. It was so cliche I thought I'd stepped into a bad movie. He hadn't even tried to hide it. Just left it there, looped casually around the gear shift like a trophy. My hair's dark. He knew that. She clearly wasn't me. And maybe that's when the shift really happened, when the sadness started to give way to something else. Not rage, not even heartbreak, just this cold, precise clarity. He was cheating. I didn't need him to admit it. I didn't even need to see it with my own eyes anymore. I knew. And knowing, that gave me power. I stopped asking questions, stopped seeking answers, because I already had them, and he didn't even know he'd handed them to me. Every lie he told, every lazy excuse, was a breadcrumb leading me right to the truth. And the truth? It was freeing, because if he thought he could play me, make a fool out of me in my own relationship, then he clearly didn't know who he was messing with. Not yet. But he would. I didn't go looking for her. Let's just make that clear. I wasn't the type to stalk profiles or deep dive into tagged photos. But fate? Fate had other plans. It was a Sunday afternoon, one of those perfectly normal days where nothing dramatic is supposed to happen. I was scrolling through Instagram trying to numb my brain with brunch photos and dog reels when I saw it. A familiar jacket, that olive green bomber I'd bought him for his birthday. I remember he hated it at first, said it wasn't his style, but I caught him wearing it all the time after that. Thought it was sweet. Except in this photo, he wasn't with me. He was standing behind a woman I didn't recognize. Long legs, icy blonde bob, pouty mouth like she'd swallowed a lemon. The photo was taken at a rooftop bar I'd never been to, and she'd captioned it with, "Sunday fun day with my fave human." Fave human, huh? I zoomed in. His hand was resting on her waist. It was subtle, innocent enough for someone who didn't know better, but I knew. I could spot his body language a mile off. That possessive lean, the way his fingers curled slightly, like they belonged there. That was intimacy. That was mine. She'd tagged him too, but his profile was private. Same as always. That was his rule. Let's keep our relationship just for us. Now I understood why. I clicked into her profile. Her name was Emery, a lifestyle content creator, of course, the kind who posted matcha shots and inspirational quotes in cursive font. I scrolled back far enough to find the first post with him. 2 months ago, that lined up perfectly with the week he claimed he had a breakthrough at work and needed space to recalibrate. He was recalibrating in her bed, apparently. I studied her for a while, not in a jealous way, more like I was inspecting a duplicate version of myself. She liked the same restaurants I introduced him to, quoted the same movies I'd watched with him on rainy nights, even wore similar perfume. I saw the bottle in the background of one of her bathroom selfies, the exact one I used to keep on my nightstand before it mysteriously went missing. She was living a life he'd built with me, only now she was the leading lady. And the weirdest part? I didn't hate her, not yet anyway. She didn't know about me, or maybe she did, and she just didn't care. But in that moment, she wasn't my enemy. He was. He was the one lying to both of us, playing house on 2 separate stages like he was some sort of emotional puppeteer. I closed the app, heart pounding like I'd just run a marathon, but I wasn't crushed. Not anymore. I was lit up. Because now that I'd seen her face, I knew exactly who the dinner invitation was going to, and I'd make sure they both showed up. The plan didn't come to me all at once. It started small, just a fantasy I nursed when the nights got too quiet. What if I didn't cry? What if I didn't beg? What if I didn't give him the satisfaction of watching me break? What if, instead, I turned the tables? At first, it was just thoughts, little ideas, petty ones, really. Like keying his car or sending screenshots of his texts to his mom, but those felt too temporary, too messy. I didn't want to be the woman he called crazy in his breakup story. I wanted to be the woman he never saw coming. And then one morning, while he was in the shower, I saw his wallet sitting on the dresser. He was careless like that. Never thought I'd look. I slid his credit card out, turning it over between my fingers. And that's when it clicked. Dinner. A nice one. The kind where they hand you the bill in a leather folder and look you in the eye like they're checking if you can afford it. The kind of place he always took me when he was trying. To impress me, I could almost see it. The look on his face when I handed him the bill he didn't know he was paying. The look on hers when she realized who I was. The poetic satisfaction of watching them both try to keep their masks on while everything crumbled beneath them. I smiled to myself, sliding the card back into his wallet before he stepped out of the shower. That was the beginning. I spent the next few days planning like it was a military operation. Booked a reservation under a fake name, one of those trendy new restaurants with dim lighting and overpriced cocktails. I even picked a date that I knew he'd be busy on. Busy with her, of course. The invite to Emery was almost too easy. I DM'd her from a burner account, pretending to be a PR person offering a free tasting menu for select influencers. Told her she could bring a guest, gave her the time and date. She was thrilled, said she couldn't wait. He didn't get an invite. Not directly. I simply told him we had dinner plans. Somewhere special. Just us, I said, batting my lashes in the mirror while he barely looked up from his phone. It was all coming together. And the best part? Neither of them suspected a thing. He thought I was still blissfully ignorant, and she thought she was walking into a free meal. But what they were really walking into? A storm. One I'd been brewing quietly for weeks. And they wouldn't see it coming until the thunder was already crashing overhead. The night of the dinner felt like the opening scene of a thriller. Calm, but not quiet. Tense, but not chaotic. Yet. I dressed carefully, choosing a black satin dress that fit like a secret. Not too showy, but intentional, like armor disguised as silk. I took my time with my makeup, lined my eyes with precision. Red lips, not the flirty kind. This red was war paint. I curled my hair just the way he liked, which felt ironic given what was coming. But that was the point. Let him think everything was fine. Let him think he still had the upper hand. He picked me up in his usual too loud car, told me I looked insane, which I chose to interpret as insanely good. He was distracted, though, kept checking his phone, probably texting her. That part almost made me laugh. If only he knew. The hostess greeted us with a practiced smile and led us to our table, candlelit, tucked into a corner, private enough for secrets. I had asked for that specifically. He didn't notice the extra place setting. Or maybe he did, but assumed it was a mistake. He always assumed things worked in his favor, didn't he? That the world would bend for him, as it always had. Did. You plan this just for us? He asked, scanning the restaurant like he was already bored. I smiled. Of course. He leaned back in his chair, relaxed. That smug ease on his face, it fueled me. We ordered drinks. I sipped mine slowly, pretending to hang on his every word. It was like watching someone perform a character they didn't realize had already been canceled. Then, right on cue, she walked in. Emery. In a white dress, no less. She looked confused for half a second when she saw us. Then, recognition set in. Her eyes flicked from him to me and back again. You could almost hear the gears grinding in her head. He froze. That was my favorite part. What is she doing here? They asked. Almost, in unison. Lovers united in panic. I tilted my head, calm as the sea before a tsunami. Oh, I thought it would be fun. You both like surprises, right? Emery looked like she wanted to bolt, but the waiter had already brought over the wine. And, let's be honest, the curiosity was stronger than her shame. They both sat, hesitant, watching me like I was a live grenade. I wasn't angry. Not anymore. I'd gone past that. What I felt now was focus, control. It was my dinner, my table, my show, and the opening act had just begun. If awkward silence were a sound, it would have been deafening, the kind that made the clinking of cutlery sound like thunder. I sipped my wine, letting it sit on my tongue a second longer than necessary, just enough time for the discomfort to spread across the table like a stain. Neither of them spoke at first. I didn't rush it. Emery fiddled with her napkin, folding and unfolding it into smaller and smaller triangles. He cleared his throat at least 3 times, like it would clear the guilt, too. So, I said brightly, how long have you two been seeing each other? The words floated across the table like dandelions. Light, lovely, until they landed. His jaw clenched. Hers dropped. Natalie, he started, but I held up a finger. Don't lie. Not tonight. It would just be insulting. Emery finally spoke, voice small, but not entirely innocent. I didn't know you were together. I thought you broke up. That's funny, I said, because he was inside me last Tuesday and texting me goodnight while he was probably lying next to you. She blinked. Twice. He turned pale, then red. The shifting colors of someone realizing their mask was slipping, and there was no mirror to check. I leaned in, resting my chin on my palm. Don't worry. I'm not mad at you, Emery. You were just a tourist. He handed you the brochure, didn't he? Sold you the dream. Forgot to mention the part where I was still paying the bills. He reached for his drink but knocked it slightly, spilling a little onto the white tablecloth. Perfect. Even the wine knew what kind of night it was. You've lost it, he muttered. You've gone mental. Ah, there it is, I replied, smiling without teeth, the classic fallback. When a woman finally reacts, she must be crazy. Not clever, not rightfully angry, just crazy. They exchanged a glance, some silent plea for a united front, but it was too late. I had pulled the pin hours ago. They were just realizing the grenade was in their laps. I invited you both here to make things easier, I said, my voice now cool, measured. I thought it would save time. No more secrets, no more pretending. We can all be honest for once. I could see the calculations in his eyes, the squirming just beneath his skin. He wanted to flip the table, storm out, reclaim the power. But he didn't know how. Not this time. You're twisted, he spat. I shrugged. Maybe. Or maybe I just got tired of eating betrayal with a polite smile. Emery didn't speak again. She looked at him, then me, and I could tell the glamour had cracked for her too. The prince she thought she'd stolen wasn't wearing a crown, just a cheap disguise. The waiter came by. Are we ready to order? I grinned. Oh, we're just getting started. The waiter hovered like he could feel the tension, but had been trained to ignore it. I caught his eye and said, We'll take the chef's special. 3 of them. The audacity of ordering dessert when the table was a war zone. It felt poetic. He nodded and walked away quickly, almost like he was relieved to escape. Across from me, he was still seething. Emery kept her gaze down, but she was listening now. Properly listening. Not to defend him, not to argue, but like someone in the front row of a car crash, frozen in place and unsure if they'd walked into traffic or were about to be pulled from it. I've spent the last year thinking I was going mad, I said, turning my wine glass slowly between my fingers. Every time something felt off, I'd gaslight myself before you even had to. How convenient for you. Natalie, it wasn't like that. Really? I asked. Because it looked a lot like you saying I was paranoid while you were texting her from our bed. It felt a lot like you guilt-tripping me into apologizing for being suspicious, when I was right the whole time. He had no comeback, just that empty, mouth-open look of a man whose excuses had expired. They don't print new ones fast enough for moments like this. I guess I should thank you both, I said, picking up my water and sipping calmly. You've made it really easy for me to let go. No wondering, no questions left. Emery finally spoke. I didn't mean to get involved in something like this. He told me it was over. And you believed him? I said, tilting my head. That's not your fault. That's his craft. He's very good at playing the victim. He'll probably try that with you next. Just give it time. I wouldn't do that, he cut in, sharp and indignant. Don't make me out to be some kind of manipulative. You are manipulative, I interrupted. You've built a career out of it. Emotional fraud, gaslighting, rewriting history. I'd say you should teach a masterclass, but you'd probably just flirt with your students. He leaned back in his chair, arms crossed now. The defensive posture of a man who knew he couldn't argue the facts. He was losing the room. Emery wasn't defending him. I wasn't breaking. It was like watching a king realize his crown was plastic and the throne had termites. Our desserts arrived, some intricate flourless chocolate thing that was probably meant to be shared. None of us touched them. I looked at the plate, then at the 2 of them, and smiled. You know, I said lightly, when people say revenge is sweet, I don't think they mean the sugar. He looked like he might speak, then didn't. Emery picked up her spoon but didn't lift it to her mouth. I leaned back, satisfied. It was almost time. The silence between us had settled in like a thick fog, but it wasn't the kind of silence that feels comfortable. It was suffocating, filled with the weight of everything unsaid. I watched him try to break it, but he was out of tricks now. The charm, the lies, the excuses, all of them had worn thin, and it was like watching the last. Threads of a carefully woven web snap one by one. I set my glass down with a soft clink and pushed my chair back slightly. He was still staring at me, expecting me to crumble, to break down, or to offer him some kind of plea for forgiveness. But that was never going to happen. "Did you really think I wouldn't find out?" I asked, leaning forward. "That I'd just keep pretending I didn't notice all the little things? The way you started texting her in the middle of the night, how you'd fall asleep with your phone in another room, the random gaps in your schedule. How naive do you think I am?" His jaw tightened, and I saw the flash of anger in his eyes. "I didn't mean to hurt you. You don't understand." "Oh, I understand perfectly." I cut him off, my voice low and steady. "You've been stringing me along, haven't you? Lying about your feelings, pretending everything was fine, while you were out there making plans with her. All of this while I was sitting at home, believing you when you said you loved me." I glanced over at Emery. Her face was pale, the weight of the situation pressing down on her too. I could see the regret in her eyes. But there was something else too. Something almost like relief. As if she hadn't realized until this moment just how deep she'd been dragged into this mess. He turned to her, his gaze full of desperation. "You don't understand. This isn't..." I waved a hand dismissively. "No, she doesn't get it. Because she wasn't the one you promised your future to. She wasn't the one you made plans with and then abandoned. But you and I, we've been in this dance for months, and I'm tired of it. I'm tired of being the punchline in your little game." There was a tense pause. The kind of pause that screams, "This is it. There's no going back." I took a slow breath, letting the tension build between us. Then, with a sudden movement, I pulled out the envelope from my bag and slid it across the table. He blinked, momentarily confused, but then the realization hit him. "No," he whispered, his face draining of color. "What is this?" I met his eyes, calm and composed. "Open it." He didn't move. Emery looked over at me, her face pale. I didn't care. I didn't care about the drama anymore, or the way she might feel. I'd spent far too long caring about his feelings, letting him dictate the narrative of our relationship. Now, it was my turn. Slowly, his fingers trembled as he picked up the envelope and tore it open. He glanced at the contents. 2 tickets, side by side. His face twisted in confusion. "What is this supposed to mean?" "Those are plane tickets," I said coolly. "One-way tickets, in fact. Destination? Nowhere." He looked at me, eyes wide with disbelief. "You're insane." "No," I corrected, leaning forward. "I'm done. Done with you. Done with all the lies. You and your new little friend here are going to get exactly what you deserve." His mouth opened, but no words came out. I could see the panic starting to set in. I watched him squirm as the realization sank in. "I didn't just buy these tickets," I said, voice steady and firm. "I paid for them with your stolen credit card." He froze. The color drained from his face as the weight of my words settled over him. For a moment, he looked like he was about to pass out, his lips parting, but no sound coming out. It was a rare thing, seeing him speechless, and I almost savored the moment. Emery's eyes flicked between me and him, her expression a mix of confusion and fear. I could tell she was starting to piece things together, but she hadn't fully grasped what I had planned. Neither of them had. I leaned back in my chair, taking a slow, deliberate sip of my wine. The tension in the room was so thick it felt suffocating, but I wasn't about to let up now, not after everything he'd put me through. You used my card?" He finally choked out. There was a bitter twist in his voice, as if he was somehow outraged by the betrayal of it all. "How could you?" "How could I?" I interrupted, leaning forward with a smile that didn't quite reach my eyes. "You're really asking me how I could do this?" You, who's been sneaking around behind my back for who knows how long, lying, stealing my trust, and doing God knows what with her. You think I'm the one who's crossed a line?" His jaw clenched. "You don't understand. This is all a mistake." "Oh, don't tell me that. Don't tell me it's a mistake when you've been planning this for months. You've been seeing her behind my back, lying to me, and then you have the nerve to say this is a mistake?" I could feel the heat rising in my chest, but I kept it controlled. The last thing I wanted was to let him see me lose my composure. He wasn't worth it. Neither of them were. "I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm not asking for you to explain yourself. You're getting what you deserve." I gestured to the tickets. "And you're getting it today. Both of you. The tickets are already booked. All I had to do was swipe your card. You made it easy for me." I could see the panic beginning to rise in his eyes now, but it didn't faze me. Not anymore. "I swear, this isn't what it looks like," he muttered, his voice cracking slightly. I leaned in, meeting his gaze with cold determination. "I don't need your excuses anymore. I'm done. We're done. And I'm not waiting around for some half-hearted apology. You're going to take those tickets and you're going to get on that plane. No more games, no more lies." There was a long silence. Emery still hadn't spoken, but I saw her fidgeting in her seat, her eyes flicking to the door. Was she considering running? Did she even know what kind of trouble she was in now? Then, as if on cue, he finally stood up, his chair scraping against the floor. His face was pale, his hands shaking. He was about to say something, but I didn't let him get a word in. "No," I said firmly, my voice cutting through the tension like a knife. "There's nothing left for you to say. Take the tickets or I'll call the cops." His eyes widened in panic as he processed the implications, but at this point, I couldn't care less. He'd had every chance to come clean, to make things right, and he chose this path instead. Now, it was time for him to face the consequences. The seconds dragged on, stretching into what felt like hours. My eyes never left his, and I could see him unraveling in real time. The bravado he'd come in with was completely gone, replaced by a man scrambling to hold on to whatever shred of dignity he had left. But the truth was, he had no dignity left. Not anymore. Emery was still silent, her lips trembling as she clutched the edge of the table, looking like she might either bolt for the door or try to apologize. For what? For being the other woman? For participating in something she didn't fully understand? I wasn't sure, but I didn't care to find out. He glanced at the plane tickets, still sitting on the table like some kind of final judgment, their glossy surfaces mocking him. The red bold letters with the destination of nowhere seemed to burn into his mind. I could almost hear him trying to rationalize it all, trying to figure out a way out. He didn't find one. Finally, he ran a hand through his hair and collapsed back into his chair, looking defeated. "You really did it, didn't you?" His voice was low, barely above a whisper. "You really set this up, didn't you?" I nodded slowly, almost enjoying the way his voice faltered. "You think I wouldn't? You think I wouldn't find out what you were doing? You think you could keep playing this game without consequences?" His eyes narrowed, but it was clear that the fight had gone out of him. He had nothing left to defend himself with. I could see it, the sheer weight of what was about to happen hitting him. "So what now?" he asked, his voice quiet, almost pleading. You just want to throw me out like this?" I could hear the desperation creeping in. It made me sick. "What now?" I repeated, almost disbelieving that he could still ask such a thing. "The only question left is whether you'll take your bags and leave the country, or whether I'll have to drag you out myself." He looked down at the table, his hands clenched into fists. The silence between us was heavy, thick with the realization that there was no way back from this. I wasn't going to forgive him. I wasn't going to pretend that everything would be fine just because he asked me nicely. "This is the part where you and I go our separate ways," I said, my voice steady, unwavering. "You've made your choices. Now I'm making mine." He opened his mouth to protest, but the words caught in his throat. I could see the fight in him had finally extinguished. He wasn't going to talk his way out of this one. "Take the tickets or get out," I added, my tone final. For the first time, he looked at me with something resembling respect, maybe even fear, but it was too late for that. He'd had his chances, and he'd thrown them away. I turned to Emery, who was still frozen in place, as though waiting for a cue to speak. She caught my gaze, and for a moment, I wondered if she was going to try to defend him, to make excuses. But she didn't. Instead, she just stared at the tickets, her face pale and shocked, but oddly calm. "What are we supposed to do?" she asked quietly. I met her gaze, then glanced back at him. "You can figure that out between you," I said, standing up and pulling my coat from the back of my chair. "I'm done here." With that, I walked towards the door, leaving them both behind. The silence that followed was deafening, but I couldn't help but feel a strange sense of satisfaction. The game was over, and for once, I was the one holding the cards. As soon as I stepped outside the restaurant, the cold air hit me like a slap in the face. I wrapped my arms around myself instinctively, but the chill wasn't just from the weather, it was the aftermath of what had just unfolded, heavy, suffocating, and still echoing in the back of my mind. I took a deep breath, trying to shake off the feeling of finality. Part of me expected to feel relief, to let out all the anger and frustration I'd been carrying around for months, but instead, I just felt hollow, like something had been taken from me that I could never get back. The world seemed muted as I walked down the street, each footstep feeling too loud, too deliberate. I wasn't sure where I was going, but I needed to move. I needed the space to think. My phone buzzed in my pocket, and I pulled it out, expecting a message from one of my friends, maybe checking in. Instead, it was a text from him. "I'm sorry. We can talk about this, please." I scoffed aloud, staring at the screen. I had already heard all the apologies. I didn't need any more empty words. I had lived in a constant state of doubt and frustration while he went behind my back, and now he thought a simple message would fix it all, as if the things he'd done could be washed away in a few short sentences. "We're done," I typed back, my fingers almost shaking as I pressed send. It felt like I was sending a piece of myself away with those words, but I couldn't stop myself. The choice had already been made. The damage was done. I didn't look back, didn't even check if the message had been read. Instead, I slipped my phone back into my pocket and kept walking. The city was still alive with the hum of people, the whir of traffic, but it all felt distant, like I was living in a separate world from everyone else. I didn't want to go home. I didn't want to sit in that silence where every corner of the apartment seemed to hold a memory of him, of us, before everything had fallen apart. So, I kept walking until my feet were sore and the streets started to empty, until the cold started to sting in my lungs, and my thoughts started to spiral. Why did I think he would change? Why did I ever believe him when he said he loved me? The questions kept coming, but no answers seemed to surface. What had been the point of all this, of years of trying to make things work when he had always been dishonest? Finally, after what felt like an eternity, I found myself standing outside a small cafe. It was quiet, warm inside, and I was too tired to keep walking. So, I pushed the door open, the bell ringing softly above me, and stepped inside. I didn't want answers. I didn't want to fix anything. I just needed a moment of peace. The barista, a friendly-looking young man, gave me a warm smile. "What can I get for you?" I hesitated for a moment before answering. "A tea. Just tea, please." As he moved to prepare it, I found a seat by the window and let the world go on without me for a while. My phone buzzed again. Another text from him, another apology. I turned it off without reading it. It didn't matter anymore. The tea was warm, soothing against the cold that still lingered in my bones. I wrapped my hands around the cup, the porcelain cool against my fingertips, but the warmth inside spread up my arms and through my chest. For a moment, it felt like I was back in control of my own life, of my own thoughts. Everything that had felt so overwhelming, so suffocating, seemed to ease into something more manageable. The cafe was quiet, the kind of quiet that lets you think without being bombarded by the noise of the world. There was no rushing, no obligation, just me and my thoughts. I sat back in the chair, allowing my mind to wander. The events of the night replayed over and over again, but with a new perspective. Before, I had been driven by anger, by the sting of betrayal, but now I could see things more clearly. It wasn't just about him and her. It was about me, about what I had allowed myself to accept, about the ways I had stayed in a relationship that I knew deep down wasn't right. I thought about the dinner, about the look on his face when I handed him that plane ticket, the shock, the disbelief. He hadn't expected it. No one had. I'd expected tears, pleading, maybe even an outburst. Instead, there had been nothing, just silence. And in that silence, I had seen the truth. He didn't deserve me. He never had. But even knowing that, a small part of me still wanted to reach out, to make things right in some way, to give him another chance, to fix everything that had gone wrong. It was a natural instinct, I suppose. But it was also the part of me that had been conditioned to stay, to endure, to forgive. That part of me was the one that had let him get away with everything, and it was time to let that part go. I exhaled slowly, the weight of the decision settling over me. I wasn't going to be the person who stayed for the wrong reasons. I wasn't going to be the one who forgave the unforgivable just because it was easier. I'd spent too long waiting for someone else to change, to become the person I needed them to be, and it was time to stop. The door opened, and a young couple walked in, laughing together. They made their way to a table near the back, and I couldn't help but notice the way they looked at each other. There was something light in their gaze, something real. It made me feel even more certain of my decision. I wasn't going to hold on to something just for the sake of having it. I wanted real. I wanted someone who saw me, truly saw me, and loved me for who I was. I drained the last of my tea, set the cup down, and stood up. There was a small weight lifted off me, as if the world had righted itself just a little bit. I wasn't rushing to anything, but I was moving forward, and that was enough. As I walked out of the cafe, the streets felt different, lighter somehow. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew it would be better than the past I was, leaving behind. The next few days felt like a blur. I spent most of my time buried in work, trying to keep my mind occupied to avoid thinking about what had happened. But the truth lingered at the back of my mind, like a dull ache that wouldn't go away. The silence between me and him was deafening. I hadn't spoken to him since that night, and I didn't know if I ever would, but I wasn't sure if I wanted to. I'd left him with the plane ticket. I had given him the message loud and clear. I was done. That was my final act, my final word, but somehow I felt a strange sense of unease, like I'd stepped into uncharted territory, and I wasn't sure where it would lead. The phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. It was a number I didn't recognize. My heart skipped, my stomach churned, but I answered anyway. Hello? My voice was more steady than I expected. Is this Natalie? The voice on the other end was soft, almost hesitant. I nodded, even though the person couldn't see me. Yes, this is she. There was a long pause, and then the voice spoke again, this time with more certainty. This is Claire. I don't know if you remember me, but we met a while back. Claire. I had to dig through my memory to place her, and then it hit me. She was the woman he'd been seeing behind my back, the one who had no idea I existed, the one who was as much a victim as I had been. But, at the same time, she was the person who had unknowingly stepped into my world, into a space that was mine, that I had worked so hard to create. I took a deep breath, trying to calm the sudden rise of anger, but something inside me shifted. The anger had been replaced with a strange kind of detachment. I wasn't angry at her anymore. I was angry at him, and at myself for allowing things to go this far. How did you get my number? I asked, my tone cool but polite. I found it on his phone, she replied, her voice now trembling. Look, I know this is strange, but I needed to talk to you. I sat back, my hand gripping the edge of the table as I processed her words. Talk to me? About what? There was another long pause before she spoke again, softer this time. I didn't know about you. I didn't know about your relationship. I'm sorry. I never meant to hurt anyone." Her apology felt hollow, but I couldn't blame her. She was just as much a pawn in this game as I had been. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that everything had become so tangled that the lines between right and wrong had blurred. Was it his fault? Or was it hers? Or was it just life being life? "I appreciate you calling," I said, my voice quieter now. "But it's not just about you, it's about him." I could hear her nod on the other end of the line. "I understand. I don't want to cause any more pain. I hope you find what you need." "I already have," I said before hanging up. I sat there for a moment, staring at the screen of my phone. What had just happened? Why did it feel so unresolved? Was I supposed to feel something different, something more profound after that conversation? But in the end, all I could feel was clarity. I'd made the right choice. I was free, even if the road ahead was still uncertain. The silence that followed the phone call with Claire felt different. It wasn't heavy with unresolved tension or bitter resentment. It was a quiet, almost peaceful kind of silence, but it still didn't settle the questions swirling in my head. I had made the decision to let go, to free myself from a relationship that had long been tainted by lies and betrayal, but something still gnawed at me. What had led to all of this? What had made him think that this was okay? It wasn't just about the cheating, not really. It was about the years of manipulation, the small things that added up over time. Like how he always seemed to put his needs before mine, how he'd twist every argument to make it seem like I was the one overreacting. I'd been blind to it, or maybe I just didn't want to see it. But now, all the pieces of the puzzle were falling into place, and I couldn't help but wonder if I had been too trusting, too willing to give him the benefit of the doubt. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that the betrayal had been much deeper than I initially thought. It wasn't just about infidelity, it was about respect, or rather, the lack of it. I had spent so much time trying to make him happy, to make the relationship work, and all he had done in return was take my trust, take my love, take my time. And for what? I wasn't sure if I'd ever get the answers to those questions. I wasn't even sure I needed them anymore. The truth was, I'd already made my peace with the situation. The man I thought I knew didn't exist, and I didn't want to waste any more of my life trying to figure out why. But it still stung. This sense of having been used, of having been so easily replaced. A part of me wanted to reach out to him, to demand an explanation, to make him see what he'd done. But then I remembered the look in his eyes when I handed him that plane ticket. The way his face had drained of color, how his mouth had gone dry when he realized what I had done. That was enough. I didn't need any more answers. What mattered now was that I was free. It was strange, though, how quiet everything felt, how the world seemed to have shifted, like I was suddenly living in a new version of reality that didn't include him. I couldn't quite wrap my head around it. Was this what closure felt like? It didn't feel like the grand emotional release I'd expected. There were no tears, no dramatic confrontations, no apologies, just silence. I went about my day, trying to keep myself busy, but everything felt strange. My mind kept wandering back to that night, to the looks exchanged at the dinner table, to the way the plane tickets had landed between us like a final declaration of war. I hadn't even looked at him after I gave them to him. I didn't need to. The message was clear. It had taken me so long to get to this point, but I was finally done. But as much as I wanted to move on, there was a lingering thought, one I couldn't shake. What if, in some twisted way, I had just given him what he wanted? A way out of this relationship? A chance to run off with her, free of any consequences? Did he see this as a victory? Was he relieved? Was that why he hadn't come crawling back? It didn't matter. It really didn't. I thought back to the quietness of the phone call with Claire, for all the drama and all the pain that had come. From this mess, there was one thing I had learned. I didn't need anyone to validate my decision. I didn't need anyone to tell me I had done the right thing. I already knew. The days that followed felt surreal. I thought there would be a sense of relief, a feeling of lightness that would wash over me once everything had been said and done. But instead, there was just a quiet void, an emptiness that I couldn't quite fill. For the first time in a long time, I realized I didn't know who I was without him. I wasn't sure if it was the end of the relationship that was bothering me or the way it had ended. It was too neat, too calculated, too impersonal. The drama I had expected, the confrontation I had rehearsed in my mind never came. Instead, there was just this clean break, like someone had drawn a line down the middle of my life, and I was now forced to walk in a direction I didn't know how to take. I spent most of the next few days in a fog, moving through my routine but feeling detached from it. I avoided social media, knowing I would only stumble across photos of him and her, smiling, living their new life while I sat in this awkward limbo of post-breakup awkwardness. The world continued turning. Everyone else seemed to be going on with their lives, but I felt stuck. And then, as expected, came the inevitable messages. His texts. Dozens of them. Some pleading for me to understand, some begging for forgiveness, some outright blaming me for everything that had gone wrong. He tried every angle, every tactic he thought might work, but none of them reached me. I had already made my decision. The irony of it all was that his attempts to save face, to paint himself as the wronged party, only solidified my resolve. He wasn't sorry. He was sorry he got caught. That much was clear. And in the end, it made it easier to let go. The more he tried, the more I realized how little he truly understood me, how little he ever had. He didn't see me. Not really. I didn't reply to any of his messages. Not out of spite, but because I realized there was nothing left to say. Nothing he could say would change what had happened. I didn't need his excuses. I didn't need his guilt. I didn't need him, and I didn't need her. But still, the silence between us didn't feel like closure. I wanted more. I wanted something to make sense of it all. I wanted to feel like this was the final chapter, the end of the book where everything wrapped up in a neat, tidy package. But life doesn't work like that. There are no neat endings, no guarantees that everything will make sense. I could already feel the familiar pull of my own guilt, that old voice in the back of my mind that whispered, "What if you're being too harsh? What if you're overreacting?" But I shut it down. I had learned to trust my instincts, to listen to the voice that told me when something wasn't right. And this wasn't right. He had betrayed me. He had lied to me. He had broken my trust in ways I couldn't even begin to comprehend. He didn't deserve my forgiveness? Not yet. Maybe never. I finally picked up my phone and texted Claire. "Are you okay?" It was simple. I didn't want to push her, didn't want to make her feel like I was expecting some deep conversation. I wasn't. I was just curious. Curious about where her head was at. Because, in a way, we were both in this mess together, even if we hadn't chosen it. Her reply came almost immediately. "Not really, but I'm trying to figure it out. Thank you for asking." It wasn't much, but it was enough. For now, that was enough. I woke up to the sound of my phone ringing, its harsh ringtone cutting through the quiet of the early morning. It was still dark outside, the kind of early where the world hasn't fully woken up yet. I rubbed my eyes, squinting at the screen, unsure of whether I was still half dreaming. It was his name. I froze. My finger hovered over the screen, the weight of the decision heavy in the silence. Part of me didn't want to answer. It felt like a mistake, like opening a door that had already been closed for good. But another part of me felt curious. I was angry, yes, but I also couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this than I had allowed myself to acknowledge. I tapped the screen, swiping to accept the call. My heart was pounding in my chest as I brought the phone to my ear. "Hello?" My voice was steady, but I could feel the tremor beneath it. "Natalie?" His voice came through, low and thick with a mix of desperation and guilt. I've been trying to reach you." I said nothing. I just let the silence sit between us. "I know you're probably angry, and you have every right to be. I'm not calling to make excuses, okay? I'm not trying to defend myself. I need to say something." I could hear him shifting around, probably pacing, trying to find the right words. It was pathetic. I didn't need his words. I didn't need him trying to justify everything. The betrayal still stung, fresh and raw in my mind, but I kept listening. "I miss you," he continued, his voice softer now, almost pleading. "I miss us, and I fucked up. I know I did, but I don't know what to do with myself, Nat. I don't know how to fix this." The words seemed rehearsed, too neat to be genuine. I wanted to hang up, to tell him to never call again, but something stopped me. Was it pity? Maybe. Or was it just a sick curiosity, a need to hear him admit what he had done? "I'm sorry for what happened," he added, his voice quivering. "I should have been honest with you from the start. I never meant to hurt you." "I think you did," I said, my tone flat. There was no malice in it, just truth. He exhaled, sharply, like my words had hit him harder than he'd expected. "I deserve that," he murmured. "I don't expect you to forgive me. I just need to know if there's any chance at all that we could figure this out. You and me." A laugh bubbled up in my chest, bitter and bitterly ironic. I wasn't sure if I was laughing at him, at myself, or at the sheer absurdity of it all. He had cheated on me, lied to me, and now he was asking if there was any chance. "No," I said finally. The word felt solid. I'd said it before, but this time, it had weight. "No," I repeated. "There's no chance, Jack. Not after everything." There was a pause. I could almost feel the weight of the silence on the other end of the line before he finally spoke again, his voice small. "Okay," he said, and with that, the call ended. I set the phone down and leaned back against the pillow, my thoughts swirling in the quiet of my room. A strange sense of calm washed over me, not relief, not happiness, just calm. It was over. And somehow, that felt like the beginning of something new. I didn't know where I was going from here, but I knew I was going alone. And for the first time in a long while, I was okay with that. I hadn't heard from Jack since that phone call. Not a word. I didn't know whether to feel relieved or irritated. I guess I had expected him to beg for a second chance, to somehow twist things around to make himself seem like the victim. But there was nothing. It was almost anticlimactic, like he'd just given up the moment I'd said no, which, I suppose, was the point. It took me a while to process everything that had happened in the last few days. The dinner, the confrontations, the calm facade I had managed to hold throughout it all. It had all been a blur. But as the dust settled, I found myself thinking less about Jack and more about me. About what I had been through and what I was going to do next. I needed a new plan, a real one this time. Something that didn't involve him, his lies, or the years I had wasted wondering if I was good enough. I went about my days with a new sense of focus. Work was a distraction, of course, but it also gave me the space I needed to think. I started going back to the gym, something I hadn't done in months, if not years. It felt good, reconnecting with my body in a way I hadn't for so long. The sweat, the burn, the feeling of pushing myself to be stronger, physically and mentally. It was like my own form of therapy, a reminder that I didn't need anyone to validate me. And then, a few days later, the phone rang again. I looked at the screen, and there it was, Jack's name. I wasn't sure what I expected. Part of me wanted to ignore it, block him, pretend like this never happened. But another part of me, curious, stupidly curious, picked up. "Hello? Nat?" Jack's voice came through, thick with hesitation. I didn't mean to just leave things like that. I cut him off. "What do you want, Jack?" He paused, the tension between us palpable through the line. I could almost hear him fumbling for the right words. I wasn't sure what he was trying to do. What could he possibly say that would make a difference now? His voice cracked, and for a second I wondered if he was going to cry. "I just want to talk. Can we meet? I need to explain myself. Please. One last time." I sighed, my grip tightening on the phone. I didn't need to hear his excuses anymore. I didn't need him to explain why he had cheated or how sorry he Was. What I needed was for him to stop taking up space in my life. "No," I said firmly. "I don't think you understand, Jack. I'm done with all of this. I'm done with you." There was a long pause on the other end. I could hear him breathing, the faint sound of him trying to process my words. But I didn't care. "I need you to stop," I continued, my voice even. "You've had your chance. I'm not going to waste any more time on you." Another pause, and then, without another word, I hung up. For a brief moment, I just stood there, staring at the screen. It was over. Finally. And it felt good. The days after that call felt different. Lighter, almost. I hadn't realized how much emotional baggage I'd been carrying until it was gone. Sure, there were moments when the silence felt unnerving. Moments when the thought of Jack, his smile, the way he could always talk his way, out of things, crept into my mind. But I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't devastated. I was just done. It was like a weight had lifted, and I could finally breathe. I spent that weekend alone, doing things I had put off for far too long. I cleaned out my closet, threw away old photos, even rearranged the furniture in my living room. It wasn't just about physical space. It was about reclaiming my life, piece by piece. I had spent so much time trying to fit into a relationship that wasn't right for me, so much time worrying about someone else's happiness that I had lost sight of my own. Now, I had the chance to rebuild. And rebuild, I did. By Monday, I had signed up for a new online course, something completely unrelated to my work, photography. I'd always been interested in it, but it had never felt like the right time. But now it felt like the perfect time. It wasn't about the potential, career change, or trying to make a living out of it. It was about doing something for myself, something that was mine. As the weeks passed, I found myself sinking deeper into the joy of learning something new, of seeing the world through a different lens, both literally and figuratively. It was a reminder that the world hadn't ended, just because one relationship fell apart. In fact, it was just beginning. But there was still one thing left to do, something I'd been avoiding. I needed to go through the motions of closure, even though I had already let go. I needed to make sure that Jack understood once and for all that there was no going back. That the woman he thought he knew was gone. And the one standing before him now wasn't interested in any of his half-baked apologies or promises. I sat down that evening and typed out a letter. "Dear Jack, I know you probably thought there was some chance of us fixing things, of us going back to the way we were, but that's not going to happen. I've learned a lot about myself these past few weeks, and the person I was when I was with you isn't someone I want to be anymore. I deserve better than the way you treated me, and I've realized that I don't need your approval, your excuses, or your presence in my life. I hope you find whatever it is you're looking for, but I won't be a part of it. Goodbye." I printed it out, folded it neatly, and dropped it in the post. The final step. I didn't feel angry. I didn't feel bitter. I just felt free. The sun had set by the time I finished, casting a golden glow across my living room. I stood at the window, looking out at the world beyond. It felt vast, and I felt for the first time in years like I was ready to face it, on my own terms. No more distractions, no more regrets, just me and everything I was going to become.